Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. Hey everybody, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 134 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. I'm sitting in my new favorite podcast recording room, my bedroom. It's been a long time since I've sat in here and done any recording, probably about a month. I had an awesome vacation, which I've talked about a ton on social media. So this is airing on the end of March 26th or so. And this is a really, really tricky time of year. I think I start a lot of podcast episodes that way, but such is the nature of grief, profound grief, and also extreme joy is that anniversaries come up and events and dates on the calendar and TV shows and songs, things that trigger a memory. And I call spring now the season of Molly. One thing I loved when I first had Gracie and Molly was that their birthdays were in April. And I loved spring. And April has always been one of my favorite months. You start April coming out of March, which is sort of your exit of winter, and you finish it going into May, which is your entrance to summer. And so as a child, I really, truly always loved the month of April. I have mixed emotions about it now just because it precedes May, and that's when Molly died. So I have such an up-down relationship now with this time of year. And so I know that I'm tender and shaky and all that sort of thing. So a couple of things I want to just say before we get started is this is in fact the season of Molly. And that's what I'm calling this time of year from here on out. One of the things you do in the process of grieving a loved one is first you're sad for a long time and you want people to acknowledge your sadness. You want everyone to miss the person that you miss. But after a while, it gets exhausting to keep missing somebody and to keep asking others to miss somebody at the same level that you miss them at. Nobody will miss Molly as much as we do. We meaning Gracie, Kenny, and I. No one can because they didn't live with her every day. I have people in my life and family members that miss her profoundly and friends of hers. But again, when it comes to immediate family, that's the crux of it. And the season of Molly is now going to encompass lots of events that will ultimately bring money into the MollyB Foundation, but also serve as social gatherings and get-togethers that will allow people to commune in a wonderful spirit of giving and of support and of justice and of loving one another, because those were things that were important to Molly. Her birthday is April 1st. She would be turning 21 this year. When she turned 16, shortly after her 16th birthday, we gave her a sweet 16. And it was a party that we threw at the Capitol Center for the Arts that about 400 people came to, I would imagine. It was packed. It was amazing. And we danced and we sang and we ate food and the grown-ups drank and the kids ate pizza and I gave away pictures and there was a photo booth. It was just your classic bash and it was super well attended. Of course, it didn't cost anything. And that was sort of my thing. Like, I just wanted people to come and have a good time. I said at that time, in 5 years from now, we'll be throwing her her 21st birthday. And we will throw her a 21st birthday celebration. That won't take place until May 18th. And that's for a number of reasons. One, availability of the theater. Two, timing of the people that I would want involved and to be present at the celebration. Three, planning on my part. April 1st comes around very quickly. 4, the date, May 18th, coincides pretty closely with MollyB the musical, which is ultimately what I would like to have as the major fundraiser for the MollyB Foundation moving forward after her 21st birthday gala. I would love to every year host a show, sponsor a show through the MollyB Foundation that features local artists, singers, dancers, actresses, actors, musicians to come and perform, and we call it MollyB the musical. Her memorial service was one of the most profoundly phenomenal things ever. So all of this will become part of the season of Molly. There are several other things. A very common thing to do on your 21st birthday is have your friends Venmo you money for drinks, right? So look for a quick 24-hour Venmo fundraiser or PayPal fundraiser, whatever, but it's typically done with Venmo. And I'll offer up little trinkets and things. If you make a donation, buying Molly a drink, what you get. So that will be fun. Look for that. I just look for that on social media and on the MollyB Foundation page. Bye Bye Birdie was Molly's last show. It was performed in April of 2016. No Lie, performance ensemble group at Renlet Middle School, directed by Karen Braz, Molly's director, is doing Bye Bye Birdie this spring. So
We're looking to have some sort of fundraising effort around that. By the time you hear this, that will have already occurred. So, yay, it went great. As I record this, I have huge anxiety around going and seeing it, but I'm going to do it. I think it's important. In May, we will have the MollyB WOD, which is at CrossFit Gym, and every CrossFit gym affiliated or associated with Molly or Gracie or me. And that looks to be wonderful. It's a simple workout. One of Molly's sort of admirers in the CrossFit realm is a woman named Emily McCormick. And Emily was working out at CrossFit Ironborn when Molly and Gracie would come with me, oftentimes to CrossFit. And she was a ballet dancer. And so Molly, Gracie, and Emily really clicked. And when Molly died, Emily was quite devastated. She made up a workout, and my gym, I'm going to cry now, gave me, sort of gifted me the Molly WOD. So I'm wearing the MollyB WOD shirt right now, and it was a workout put together that everyone could participate in. You wouldn't need equipment. You wouldn't even need a CrossFit gym. Emily understood that Molly understood the spirit of service and the spirit of inclusion that didn't hurt others, right? If you're excluding somebody to include them, you have a problem. And Molly was very, very big on making sure that everyone could participate in a way that was good for the group as a whole. So that's coming up. MollyB Monday is just a second Monday in May. So it would be, kids would have been back in school for a week after April vacation, and then MollyB Monday would come. So the CrossFit Memorial Workout is May 4th. MollyB Monday this year would be Monday, May 6th. That would be MollyB Monday. And basically that's just a day of good deeds. It's been relatively informal. The school district started it, and it was huge. And a couple of years ago, I reached out to keep it going. And somebody gave me grief about it. Like, we don't sponsor these things, but I wasn't the one that made it up. So it's a little weird. I have to just make sure it's okay. But that's not just school district wide, it's everywhere. And so it's just a day to do good deeds. So the MollyB WOD would be on the 4th. Monday, May 6th would be MollyB Monday. You wear pink or a MollyB item and do a good deed. I remember when I found out about MollyB Monday, I was tutoring and teaching at Parker Education. And I had a student who I was helping, and she was wonderful. And she came in all dressed in pink, and I was having a really bad time. Obviously, I think it was like the 1-year anniversary. It was ugly and bad. And she goes, "Today's MollyB Monday." And my heart went into my throat. So I'll always, always, always remember that. And then May 18th will be her 21st birthday. So the season of Molly, right? Putting together these events that really celebrate who she was and raise money for her. Other MollyB Foundation sponsored events are Barb's Track Camp. I've never made any money on that. I break even every year because I overstaff it completely. And I don't like to charge a ton of money because I want a lot of people to be able to come. Track Camp will be the 3rd week of June, and all the money, any money made, goes to the MollyB Foundation. And I also afford my staffers, community service hours toward what they might need at their schools. Starting this summer in August will be Theater Camp, Theater in the Park. Karen Braz is helping me out with that. That's still in the works as of this recording. Hopefully that will quickly have more details to it. And then in November, I am resurrecting the Flower Day 5K. And the significance of that, me as a runner, but my cross-country team, in the fall of 2002, I was pregnant with Molly. And that was a year that we won the New England title, Class L's or Division I states in New England. And my team gifted me a road race, which of course is the gift that keeps on giving. And when I lost my job in the district, I stopped doing the race because it was so tied into girls cross-country. And I've decided that I can absolutely resurrect that race. And so it'll be the first Sunday in November. I believe it's November 2nd. And it will take place at White's Park in our neighborhood. And it will, again, raise money for the MollyB Foundation. It's an awesome race. It was relatively well attended. The first year, I think we had like 30 people, but it built up to about 150. So hopefully that will become a more regular event in our town. So those are all things that are coming up. And I'm sort of starting all that because this podcast comes out next week. When you listen, it will be the day after Molly's 21st birthday. It'll be April 2nd. And I will be 24 hours out of surgery on my toe to fix it. So the timing of my surgery at first I thought was terrible, but actually it's great because it will limit my activity out of the house, which will give me more time to coordinate MollyB Foundation stuff. So it doesn't the universe work in different ways. Let's get back to the matter. This podcast episode is really, really inspired by a show that I watched on Netflix. So I've done this a few times now. I've seen a show or a documentary on Netflix and been so affected by it that I've done a podcast episode on it. And as I start talking, I'm going to start crying because I just finished this series this morning. I started watching 6 Feet Under a couple of weeks before we went on vacation. So I would say mid-February. And I avoided watching it for a long time. It would come up in my searches when I was just looking new on Netflix or popular on Netflix or now streaming, because I didn't want to have another TV show about death. And it had this bright green hearse, which is a major piece of the story. Yeah, I don't know. It just didn't strike me. And as is the universe, whatever the powers of the universe are, one night I was scrolling and I just decided I'm going to watch this. And so I did. The basic storyline is a family that owns a funeral home, Fisher and Sons Funeral Home. So it's the Fisher family. There's a mother and a father and three children, Nathaniel Jr., David, and Claire. And the story takes place in the early 2000s. It starts right around 2001, I think, maybe 2002. It's so well put together, I can't even wrap my head around it. So here's one of the big sort of parallels in my life. So right behind me, if you're watching, is this ridiculous unicorn calendar that I have. I love it. It's unicorns doing yoga. When I just set up right now to record this podcast, it was still on February. And I remember before I left for vacation thinking, oh, I should set that ahead so it's all ready when I come back. And that sort of requires forward thinking. But I didn't. I left it alone. So when I came back, it was still in February. So I know this might seem like a minuscule sort of detail, but it speaks so strongly to me and the conflict for me in my own grief with Molly. I was talking to Gracie this morning because I've been really, really sad and kind of anxious and stressed out. One of the biggest things that happened to me when Molly died was I wanted time to stand still. I was in an utter panic because everything changed so suddenly. I wanted things to stay perfectly still. And there are times that I still feel that way. When Gracie and I look at pictures of Jack, part of me loves watching him grow, but part of me just wants to stay in 2021 when he was born and just stay there and have him be teeny forever. Of course, that's impossible. But the calendar was just such an analogy for me, such an illustration of my thinking that sometimes I can't let go of the past. I hold on to what was as a measure of comfort and I think safety. And then sometimes I can look ahead and see that there's safety and comfort there. Along with that calendar analogy, in the past month or so, several people in my life have passed away. Now, this is happening all the time. I did a whole series of episodes in the summer and the fall about people my age and older passing away. So Mary Lou Sayer died. I did a blog on her, which if you haven't read it, go to 1,000 Tiny Steps and give it a read. She lived to be 103. As I record this, Art Ellison, Anna's dad, is in hospice and actually just making a very, very meaningful death process for himself. People are visiting. He's saying goodbye. I think he wrote an article for the newspaper that essentially is his own obituary. It's beautiful. He's just 70, far too young to die. My friend Pam, who I danced with in high school and was in the play Oliver with, her parents had both passed away in the last 18 months or so. She's a disastrous mess. It's just this process of people dying and life going along. So ML's death stuck with me because she was 103. So who did she even know anymore? Like no one that she knew when she was 60, that was her age, was likely alive when she died. So everyone in her life are people who are much younger than her. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing. It's why as you get older, your friends should get younger. So you're always surrounded by people, yes? But it struck me that the people surrounding her bed, didn't know her. She didn't know them for probably more than half her life. Great-grandchildren, grandchildren, right? Those people came into her life late. It's just not lost on me that this process of living this physical reality, which is very finite, going into an infinite reality, which is the spiritual realm, wherever we were before we got here and where we'll go after. It's just not at me. It just knots at me, it holds on tight to me. So back to 6 Feet Under. 6 Feet Under was 5 seasons. Each season was 12 to 13 episodes. So, 5 times 10 is 50. So probably 60 or 70 episodes. Now with streaming, you can sort of binge through a show. I like it and I don't. It doesn't give me a lot of time to process. The minute that the episode ends, I want to go right into the next one. And I have a list of shows that I want to watch again. And of course, this will be one of them. So I've binged it. I watched it on my phone all during vacation because I was always sharing a room with Gracie and Jack and I didn't want to keep everyone awake. And I came back and finished it. Yesterday I was sick. I was in bed all day and I watched like 10 episodes. So the final episode I watched this morning, and I'm sort of glad it wasn't the middle of the night because I've been able to get up and walk around and sort of process it. I think one of the reasons I was supposed to watch this episode is it touches on everything. Every episode starts with the death of somebody. The episode opens with characters that are not a part of the series, and it's the last moments of their lives. And some of the deaths are very peaceful. A husband wakes up and his wife is dead next to him in the bed. Some of them are horribly violent. A man getting severed by an elevator, trying to get people out of a stalled elevator, and everything in between. There were murders, there were suicides, there were cancer deaths, there were, so many different deaths. So that's a part of it. And then a piece of each episode would be the funeral for that family of that person that died. So you spent so much of the episodes looking at what it is to run a funeral home, that funeral directors are very comfortable with dead bodies, very comfortable draining the blood out, putting the embalming fluid in, all the things that happen to bodies. It truly takes a special person. A really good friend of mine, Jen, I consider her family, is just graduating from mortuary school. And I think, what would make somebody want to go into that? And quite honestly, with a dead child, I'm honored and relieved that there are people in the world that can revere a dead body, right? So that was a very, very big piece of what I liked about this series. The other thing that I liked about it was it went into the dynamics of a family. So it takes place at the turn of the century, not the 1990s into the early 2000s. So I was very alive at that time. I got married in 2000. I had my babies in 01 and 03, baby Gordy 99. So that chunk of time represented my sort of true living in adulthood, starting a family, working on my career, all of that, right? And so it was easy for me to relate to the music and the clothing and the styles and the mindset. It all made sense to me. And it was sort of fun. And I got a kick out of looking people put CD players into the car and always starting a car with a key and just different things like that. Every family member had significant amount of the series dedicated to them. The oldest son, Nate, the middle son, David, the youngest child, the daughter, Claire. In the first episode, you meet them all and you get a sense of who they are and what their struggles will be. In this series, it talks about family. So this family lives in a funeral home. The youngest daughter is into some pretty serious drugs as a senior in high school. She feels very, very sort of ignored. The middle son, David, is gay. And growing up, in the year 2000, he's in his 20s. So he grew up at a time where it wasn't really okay to be gay. And it's still not okay with a lot of people, but it's certainly much more societally accepted, as it should be. And so you get to witness all that he went through as a gay man. And he actually, in the process of the series, comes out to his family. Generational expectations. So in the first episode, the dad is killed in a car accident, Mr. Fisher, the owner of the funeral home. So the family all gets together for his death. And then Nate, who's lived away, stays home and becomes a part of the family. And so now you have this very workable family processing the grief of their husband and their father. And it's ugly. And they show the ugly. It shows the ugliness of grief and also the beauty of what that ugliness can bring. It's really, really, truly well done. The writers must be amazing. It goes into mental illness quite a bit. You delve into each character. So Nate has these different relationships, a woman named Lisa, a woman named Brenda, and you get into the backgrounds of them. You get into David's travails as a gay man at the turn of the century and what it's like to be him and him falling in love. And his partner is a different race than he is. And so you have a multiracial relationship that's also a gay relationship. And what are societal expectations about that? I think one of the characters I identified most with, of course, was the mother. And she's much older than me in this series, maybe. I mean, she's probably in her late 60s, early 70s throughout this series. And you can see that she's just given up her life for her family. She's been the wife and the mother. She's never worked, never went to college. And she has a lot of anger and resentment around it and this anger. And when she expresses anger, then she's consumed with guilt and cries and tries to make it up to everybody. She was such a complex character. And I can see in her my mother, I can see in her my female relatives, I can see in her what I could have been, I just see a generation not too far ahead of me and the struggles that they went through, wanting to feel valued. And of course, nothing could happen. I look at motherhood the same way I look at bus drivers, secretaries, custodians, teaching assistants. I look at a school district, and nothing would work if there wasn't a custodian, a school secretary, a nursing aide, a bus driver, paraprofessionals. If those people weren't there, the whole thing would fall apart. And sometimes they're the most invisible people. And sometimes I look at motherhood that way. So anyway, all of these things were part of the series. The season finale, I had to turn it off several times. And it's one of the reasons I'm doing this episode now. So we're coming up on the 8th anniversary of Molly's death. 8 years. And I think of how much life she had lived when she turned 8. When year 13 comes, that's going to be a hard one for us. Because, the time will be equal. The time we got with her will equal the time we've not had with her. And then after that, she will be a smaller part of our lives than when she was here. And that all of those things get tricky. The final episode, and I was wondering all the way through, how are they going to close this series? Or close it in a way that they could potentially have season 2 or another season, which I don't think they need to. But basically, in the final season episode, everything has come full circle. I don't want to go into any details because I wouldn't want to give the season away, but everything has come full circle, and it's time for truly the next generations to take place. So the mom goes into more of a retirement phase, and the grandchildren are born and they're growing up. And so the final scene of the episode, and it's like a 15-minute scene, maybe 10 minutes, is Claire, the youngest daughter, driving across the country to her new whatever awaits her. And what happens is the camera fades in and out with all the characters of the TV show old, how they die. You see how Keith dies. You see how all of these family members, how long they live and what they die of and how they die. And I couldn't stop crying. Like it just hit me. So am I sad because they died? Well, no, of course not. Not at all. I mean, people die. Oh, look at me. I'm hardly holding it together, but I think these episodes are important. It was just incredibly beautiful because the whole series was around the juxtaposition of physical death and eternal reality. All of the characters that died, the ones that started the episodes that weren't involved with the family, the funeral parlor guests and the family members come back. They don't leave the series once their character has died. The characters talk to them. They give them information. It's amazing that the actors and actresses, the characters in this show we see their thoughts, and we see these people come back and interact with the characters. And it's profound because it gives a physical view and a voice to all the thoughts in our head, and it connects them to the people that we've lost and loved. It's another piece. As someone that's lost a child, all I'm doing in my life is looking for Molly connections. It's such an important thing to see a character that's lost her husband sit and have the husband sit next to her and give her crap about something or hold her and hug her, and then see that character utilize that experience to make a better choice about something or to feel comfort. It was so profound for me. I need to also say, if you're an atheist and don't believe in any of this show, you won't guffaw at it. It's done so well. It's just produced and written so well. I must have been written by people that experienced death. So I had to keep turning the episode off and get up and walk around. And I wasn't even going to record today, except I knew that if I didn't record it, I would get over this piece of it. And I think sometimes y'all need to hear me cry and see my ugly crying face if you watch, because the juxtaposition of beauty and ugly is such a true aspect of life. Everything you look at can be beautiful and ugly. Every experience you can have can be joyful and traumatic. You can't have one without the other. I remember once saying to my mother, she was having a hard time about something. And I remember saying to her, Mom, if we'd never been sad, we wouldn't know what happy meant. Like we really appreciate summer here in New England, but it's because we live through winter. People that live in San Diego or South Florida basically have the same weather all the time. It doesn't change all that much. So you don't have a huge appreciation for weather because you don't have these drastic differences in it. And I think that's a relevant piece of my grief and healing process. Another piece of Ruth, the mother, she truly loved her life and mostly just wanted to be validated and respected. And she also hated every bit of her life and often looked back over and over again. She had a contentious relationship with her sister. Her sister was like, a product of the drug-induced, sort of sleep with whoever you want 80s and 90s. And here's Ruth raising a family, living in a funeral home and not ever feeling noticed or cared for. And they end up, I can say this without giving anything away. They end up, the course of their relationship in their full circle and coming to respect one another and love one another is profound. Of course, as you might imagine, classic Hollywood style, maybe, they secretly envy each other. Ruth wishes she was more like Sarah. Sarah wishes she was more like Ruth. It's just sort of the way it is, I think. The grass is always greener, so to speak. So in the 5 seasons of episodes, you go through the coming of age of every character in the story. You go through their marriages and their divorces. You go through their deaths or their injuries or their childbirths or their adoptions or their job losses or job gains. You go through their successes. You go through horrible crimes being committed against them. You go through their awards. You go through life. And without being trite, this series covers it all. So why am I pushing a series on all my listeners? I always want to try to make meaningful connections for those of you that need them. And if you are someone in your life that has suffered any sort of loss or tragedy, even if it isn't death, even if it's just a struggle in life that's significant. This is a show that I feel everybody would relate to. And I know that I related to it profoundly. In talking to Gracie this morning, I'm going to share with you our text thread. I was just feeling really sad. And so here's what I wrote to Gracie like an hour before I recorded this episode. Why are you anxious, Mummy? It's okay. I just finished the series I was watching and I have not stopped crying since. It was so good and so emotional. One thing Molly's death did to me was make me really fear the passage of time. I just want everything to stay the same and stand still, which I know makes no sense, but sometimes that's how I feel. Anyway, I'll be fine. We're just getting into the bad time of year and I get really wistful. I'm okay though, and I don't want you to worry about it. She wrote, yeah, it's a rocky time of year and an emotional show on top of that can make it worse for sure. So it isn't worse. I just think it brings it up. I think a million things could bring it up. What I notice in that exchange is I'm Ruth and Gracie is Claire, and I'm trying to protect her from my sadness while at the same time being honest with her about how I feel so that she has permission to be sad if that's what she needs. There's a profound scene in the show where Claire is contemplating moving away and her mother Ruth is feeling lonely. And Claire says, forget it. I won't go. I'll stay. And the mother is like, you would stay home for me? And then they hug and cry. And then she says, absolutely not. And insists that Claire go, that Claire not make the same mistake she made. That's a place I had to turn the show off and stop watching because I just go back and forth with that around Gracie. There are so many ways to deal with grief and people do it in such different ways. I remember right after Molly died, Roy wanted to come up here and empty out my house and remodel it and make it new and have a fresh start or even sell it. Like he just thought that any connection to Molly was bad. As a mother that's just lost a child, that's absolutely the worst idea possible. There has to be a process and a time. In looking at my grief friends, I have a good friend who lost their daughter, Sable. They had already planned to move. They sold their house and moved into a new house. And so she had to pack up Sable's bedroom and leave. And now she lives in the house that Sable never lived in. So I can't imagine that for me because so much happiness is in this house and in these four walls. But I do have to be honest, so much trauma and sadness is in this house and in these four walls. And there are times when I think, oh my gosh, I would just love to get away from it. And so the TV show sort of goes through all of that. Kenny and I have struggled because part of we were separated when Molly died and we got back together and stayed together because that was the right thing for all of us at the time. Gracie had lost her sister. We needed to at least stay solid as a family. And those first 2.5 years, all of us were just living parallel lives. We were all treading water in our own private oceans in the same place. When we settled our lawsuit and as my health became a priority and then Jack, the creation of Jack, that's exposed a lot of, was it the right thing for me to do to stay with Kenny? I don't know. I know that our feelings for one another are vastly different. One thing we share is our desire to honor Molly and our desire to keep our home that showed us years of happiness as a piece of property and a homestead for Jack and for Gracie. So in 50 years from now, when Jack is 53 and Gracie is 73, if they so desire, one or both of them could still live in this house. It could still be their family homestead. I'll be long gone by then unless I live to be 110. But, there's a balance. There are those who say we should have sold our house and those who totally get why we're here. Our kitchen remodel has been a huge emotional piece because, again, we're juxtaposing holding on to what we had versus keeping the framework of what we had, but infusing it with new life. And so when we came home and all of the sheetrock was up, you could no longer see where the bathroom door was or where the windows used to be or the chimney. You couldn't see any evidence of the old kitchen. It's all covered now. All you see is the new kitchen. It was really hard on all of us. It was just finite and final. It's not a bad thing. I think once it's done and we're really living a much more normal life, we'll start to see ways that we can improve and remodel the rest of our house. We moved in here, Kenny and I, in August of 2000, actually Labor Day weekend. And all we've done is paint a handful of rooms and install a bathroom until now. And a lot of the trim and woodwork hasn't been painted since we've moved in here. So we have a lot of lipstick and rouge that we can do to make this house a bit happier. So here we are. Here I am contemplating making changes as the person who wants to hold on tight to everything and keep it the same. And I can't even say those words without crying. Year 8, over half of Molly's life had been lived by her when she turned 8. She had 5 years, 1 month, and a day left. That's it. It's not much. And, Jack was born at the 5-year mark. So I think about those things now. Time is just funny. In the series finale, some of the main characters died young and of tragic deaths, and some of them lived into their 80s and 90s. I will say this, and it will not ruin the ending for you because it's a minor piece. But Claire, who's the youngest, ends up living the longest. She lives to be over 100. The visual of her death with her white hair and her veiled over eyes looking widely at the ceiling. It's just a juxtaposition of eyes that look like they can no longer see. But the expression in those eyes is that they see everything. Which brings me to a conversation I had a couple of days ago with Kenny's sister, Bobby. She just read Motherland. Bobby is a very fundamentalist Christian. And so I was concerned that she would read it and be very judgy of some of my indiscretions. And unlike what I thought, she wasn't that way at all. But what struck her was the story in the book of Molly finding out Papa Gordy died, and that she sat right up and she was so interested in the fact that Papa Gordy had all the answers now, that he knew. And we had this amazing conversation about it. And she was 8. She was the age, it was 2011, March. She was 8, and it was 8 years ago. 8 years ago that she died, and she was 8 years old when this happened. But she really, really had questions about it and was in awe of the infinite nature of spiritual life. And so when I'm watching that very last scene, of course, that's what came to mind is my conversation with Bobby, which led me to my conversation with Molly. I know this is a bit rambly, and some of my podcasts are, and that's the nature of my grief and how I share it. It's rambly. So I'll end here. If you are an angel mom or somebody in recent grief or just living a life that will have grief in it forever, I really, really do suggest you watch the show. It was amazing. And it's a show that I'll definitely rewatch because it's so directly related to events in my life. I saw myself in a lot of characters. There's a character named Brenda. My childhood wasn't quite as crazy as hers, but it was crazy. And a lot of her behavior is me. And it was hard to look at. Sometimes I got angry at Ruth, the mother. She was sometimes, in my mind, sanctimonious. And it made me realize how I sometimes feel about my mother. And that's not fair, right? It's just not fair for me to feel that way. And all of the characters have such behaviors in their adult lives that are directly related to how they were treated when they were children. And it just opens my eyes to that reality, the good and the bad. So much of my adult behavior is a direct result of my childhood experiences. And there are those who will say we have free will and choice when we're adults, and we do. But sometimes what drives the free will is a tape in our head that we have no control over and takes years to understand and process. So anyway, 6 feet under. It's perfect for me to see right now. As you listen to this, it's the end of March. Molly turns 21 next week, and we begin the season of Molly. And I hope by then I'm feeling a little bit better, although I highly doubt it. Anyway, if you've watched it, I know I ask a lot. My podcast editor gives me great advice on making it easier to respond to me. My endeavor will be to do such things, to create a link or put a question on my Instagram profile. But I would love to hear your thoughts if you've watched the show, if anything that I said resonated with you. And if you haven't watched it and you do, let me know what you think. And I really send this out to my angel moms because it really addresses the beliefs of everybody and shows all of it in an honest way. Sorry that I can't stop crying. That's me today. On Friday, March 15th, Barb is just crying. Be good to yourself, even if being good to yourself means you sit down and have a good cry. Be good to someone else. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.